you ready for a roller coaster ride that takes us all the way from the depths of the Carpathian Mountains to downtown Detroit, along with a bunch of vampires and other crazy stuff going on? This one is a really wild ride, and hopefully it's going to quench the desires of those of you who've been waiting for a decent vampire story for quite a while. It's taken me a while to find one that I really enjoyed, so hopefully you're going to feel the same by the end of this one. Oh, plus you get to hear me try and recite hip-hop lyrics at one point as well. My apologies in advance for that. Anyway, without further ado, here we go with Demon Time by Ringo Cross. Somewhere deep in Romania. There was no hope, there was no light. Salvation must be found elsewhere. Only darkness and the dragon feasted and fested here upon the pitiful, sorrowful souls that screamed in utter damnation. The underling who entered the cave gripped his chest and collapsed to his knees once he'd reached the bowels of despair. The dragon-possessed evil like a mortal soul desperately clings to faith. The terrified vampire trembled as he carefully reached for the handkerchief stuffed neatly in the front pocket of his suit coat. He coughed into it and was surprised to see it was soaked in fresh blood. Each breath was weak and overbearing. It felt like a massive vice grip had squeezed down on his ribcage and refused to give an inch. Surely he wouldn't stay. He couldn't be that zealous of a believer in the new faith. His mind justified his suffering by clinging on to the hope that he wouldn't have to stay here for too much longer. He didn't want to end up like all the other souls who were forced to grace his ungodly presence. His lips quivered when he went to speak. He almost made the mistake of uttering his name, but stopped just short. Oh, thank God, he muttered to himself in disbelief. God bless the souls brave enough to read this, as they succumbed to the same wrathful fire. The dragon was surrounded by ceremonial candles that formed a perfect circle. He meditated in bleak hatred and longed for oppression. Damnation or divination, prophecy could be changed. God's throne is mine. Flame rose from his flesh, but he was unbothered by the withering agony. The sight was blasphemy, unholy theophany opposite the burning flesh. He sat menacingly and well-tempered like a blade forged in restless hellfire. He didn't even bother to open his eyes as he waited for his trembling underling to speak. There was no flame or pain in this life or hereafter that could match his demon. One slip of the tongue and the fool before him would perish before he could blink. For he was the one who had led a rebellion, for he was the one who had taken all that was holy and tainted it. The dragon angled his head ever so slightly, away from the ethereal blaze. His tone plotted and deliberate. You seek wisdom in the fire. No, please, I don't. And what is it you fear? Oh God. Seek. Every mortal utters his name out of instinct when they come to me. Forgive me, my lord. I've come with news that the first phase of the awakening is complete. We will carry on with the next phase as ordered. Speak now into the fire. There's a slight problem. My son. No, not him. Then who? The angels have taken interest in the one who helped him pass the trial. Ah, the bard. Yes, my lord. In that case, let us see what it is they see in this foolish mortal. Send one of my saplings. As you wish. Oh, Sextus. Yes, my lord. Disturb me again while I meditate, and I'll scorch you like a soul in my lake of fire. Forgive me, my lord. Get out of my sight. Chapter 1. 2 weeks later, in Detroit. I backed my BMW into the designated spot several minutes earlier than the meeting was supposed to start. I'd been told to wait inside the car until one of the members of his gang came out to greet me. I checked my watch a second and third time. Always trying to be perfect was so nerve-wracking. Sure, everything had gone as planned thus far, but you never know, especially with a situation as crazy as this. Crazy or not, things had to go right. Why did I even agree to this? I asked myself without thinking. I mean, I know why I agreed, but whatever. I guess asking myself stupid questions aloud was one of my many bad habits. Well, at least there's no one around to see you do it this time, Lizzie. Unlike last time when you were out shopping with your benefactor and you let slip that you considered her a blood sister. I murmured this to myself, irritatingly enough. I flipped the visor down and focused on touching up my makeup instead of focusing on touching up my fractured nerves. Well, when I say focus, what I actually meant was nervously checking my eyeliner for a third and fourth time. God, I can't believe this. I can't even get my thoughts together. I thought to myself as I thought to myself how totally not right of a situation this was. Just then an African-American male, clad in urban wear from head to toe, approached my vehicle and gently tapped on the window. He laughed when I jumped, and I blushed from the sheer embarrassment of having been frightened by a human. He found the odd role reversal amusing as well. And after that we had a brief but light-hearted exchange, confirming who he was and that I was indeed who I said I was. Surprisingly, the man was a complete gentleman. He opened my door, was well-spoken, and extremely careful in his actions. He introduced himself under the alias of Big Deal, which confused me at first. Who knows, I guess it's something urbanites did to protect their identity. Oh, and I complimented him on his choice of eyewear in an honest attempt to match his politeness. He smiled and said thanks, and he quickly threw in the not-so-useful tidbit that his eyewear was Cartier. When I shrugged in innocent confusion, he tossed in the added fun fact that they were a very expensive brand of eyewear. Oh, and that he owned several pairs. We laughed under his breath when I shrugged again, obviously no less confused by what he was putting out in the ether. He opened the door to the strip club, and I was immediately hit square in the face by an avalanche of weed smoke, wild ruckus, rowdy music, and scantily clad dancers. The situation was less than ideal, but I'd already been forewarned by my benefactor that dealing with this person would always be less than ideal. I was gently guided to the last booth. It was all the way in the corner, far removed from the wildness and craziness that ensued around the stage. The booth was dark. An intuition told me that the person seated across from me was indeed the vampire I'd come to meet. Well, I cleared my throat and said, "Greetings, Mr. Winters. My name is Elizabeth Carnot. You can call me Liz. I'm assuming you have a moniker?" He looked over at the gentleman seated next to him and shook his head. Then he looked over at me and grinned. His blue eyes pierced through the darkness like an iceberg on a bitterly cold night. "Call me Icy." "I'm sorry, did you say Icy?" "Yeah, Icy. Icy." "Okay, Mr. Icy. I'm your liaison." "Mr. Icy, stop playing." "What do you mean? I wasn't." "Call me by my regular name." "Okay, what's that?" "Jake Winters." "Oh, sorry, I forgot." He pointed to the man seated next to him and blurted out, "Yeah, this is my hitter, King Tut." Greetings, Mr. King Tut." "What's up?" he replied with a nod. The individual by the name of Big Deal, the one who'd escorted me inside, he stood next to his boss with folded arms. He checked his phone a few times and seemed uneasy. By the look of it, he had some influence in our dealings and must have been a high-ranking member of their gang. But I could be wrong. You never know with these types. Seeing my confounded expression, their boss told me, "What's up? Why are you acting scared?" "I'm sorry, come again?" I asked. "Never mind. All I gotta do is sign some papers, right?" he asked in an irritated tone. placed my briefcase on the table, snapped it open, and told him, "Yeah, give me a minute. I just need to gather the necessary documents." These folks and their paperwork, Mr. Winters told his counterpart seated next to him. You already know how they get down, boss. Big Deal chimed in while patiently standing by. Hell yeah. He shot back at his gang comrade before turning his attention back to me. He studied me carefully and rather rudely for a moment longer than I would have liked before finally asking, "What's your name again?" "Elizabeth Carnot." "You seem familiar." "I do?" "Yeah." "Well, I'm sure I would have remembered if we'd met." Not you, your dad. His name's Philip, right?" "Well, as a matter of fact, yes. He's employed as a factor for my benefactors." "Yeah, I can see the resemblance. Tell the old geezer I said sup when you see him." "Sure." I smirked before looking around the place. "We couldn't have done this anywhere else." "Nope." "Really?" "I grew up in dem strips. My brothers couldn't tell me nothing, so naturally you couldn't." "Okay," I uttered, not knowing what else to say. "Are you Bathory folk the same?" "What does that mean?" I asked. "Dingy than a mother bleep. Remind me of old girl. I bet Muller you know her." "You mean the Countess?" "Yeah, the Ditz." "Yes, I know her." "I bet that up," he said before adjusting his diamond-studded watch, relieved at the fact that he didn't have to part ways with it, even though I had no idea what I was going to do with it other than stash it in one of the shelves in our museum storage room. Who knows? Maybe he'll die soon, which isn't out of the realm of possibility considering his reckless lifestyle. In that case, his watch could become one of our more dark possessions, I secretly hoped. "Damn," Big Deal murmured as he looked at his phone in dismay. His sudden uneasiness was very distracting. For a moment there, I thought something was wrong. He quietly and quickly fielded a call. Then he tapped his boss on the shoulder and whispered something in his ear. Mr. Winters looked up at him in exasperation. He just shook his head and was like, "Another one." "Yep," he solemnly replied. The boss brought his hands together and gathered his thoughts before coolly saying, "I know who it is getting at my spots, but I can't prove it." "The cash cowboys?" Big Deal asked. "Man, hell no. Put that on the bros," Mr. Winters vehemently replied to his underling. "Them bleeps tissue paper. If it wasn't for her benefactor, we would have stepped all over them with the bros." Big Deal nodded. "Yeah, right. Someone with some juice putting in some serious work." "Yeah, you good, Tut?" Jake asked. Just thinking." "What's on your mind, bro?" "That's strange. When I went to take out Martel after he murked Terrence, I don't know, boss, something was off about the whole thing. Can't put my finger on it, but we had never found Terrence's body, plus the guys keep saying he ain't dead. He came back as something that ain't human, or vampire, or whatever." "What's the word on the streets, huh?" Mr. Winters asked him with a hint of anger. "Yeah, I keep hearing rumors too. Don't know how true they are," Big Deal threw in. Tut chimed back in with the solemn statement. "Well, if it is him, I got a feeling he's working for her benefactor. You know how the Illuminati move. They're always trying to stay ahead of the game." "Word," Jake nodded. "What's the move, boss? How far are you willing to take it?" Big Deal asked very gingerly. "How many spots got knocked?" 3 so far." "Is that true?" "Yeah," Tut confirmed. Bleep. I'm willing to take it all the way. Just 'cause they on demon time don't mean I can't be on demon time too. Ain't giving up my spots for nobody." Just think about it," Deal chimed in. Here you go, about to play Gandhi. I'm saying we might not be making as much dealing exclusively to vampires, but it's safer. After we ink this deal, we got a monopoly on all the blood dens. You know them fools are more than just Detroit rights. Is that true? Jake asked me. That is correct, I nodded. Dang, what all they got? Boss, I'm telling you, lay late, man. They got Chicago, Toronto, Ohio, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and other satellite spots. Big Deal explained. Damn, he for real? He asked me. He is indeed correct, I said with a smirk. The only territorial dispute I know of is with the Windsor Vampire Order over the territory of Toronto. Oh, William's sweet ass getting it like that? He asked me again with even more shock. You mean my benefactors? Yeah, him and his fiancée. Well, I don't know what you mean by sweet, but yes, they have it like that, as you put it. Dude think he's slick, Jake groaned. It's probably him, trying to knock us off the block, Tut replied after some thought. What do you think we should do? Jake asked the homie Big Deal, hoping against hope that he had an answer instead of another irksome, nonchalant response. He just shrugged before further chagrining his boss by telling him, I think we should leave it alone. You're supposed to be my captain, not the bleep who preaches peace every time I ask you for your 2 cents. Martin Luther King wannabe-ass bleep. Bleep you, he replied back. Is, everything okay? I asked. Yeah, hold on for a sec, Jake said before signaling for one of his gang goons over by the bar. He came over and quickly passed him a blunt that was stuffed with what had to be marijuana. Jake wasted no time. He took a stupidly long toke before passing it to Tut, who did the same thing before passing it back. Then Mr. Winters took another ignorantly long toke before offering me a hit. When I politely declined, he called me a lame-ass white chick, which I found incredibly offensive, considering he was Caucasian too. So for him to insult me like that was crass, to say the least. My mind couldn't help but wonder. Why was my clan making a deal with some thoughtless churl? To be fair, foreign affairs wasn't exactly my department. Only reason I agreed to this was because our emissary was away on urgent business, and this all-important arrangement couldn't wait. Chapter 2. Suddenly the DJ made an announcement. He thanked Jake and his gang for the mountain of money they'd laid down on his workstation. The club atmosphere was instantly rejuvenated as soon as he mixed one of Mr. Winters' songs. I couldn't believe my ears. His lyrics were invective, classless, senseless, tasteless, and, worst of all, stuffed with baseless Illuminati accusations. Jake threw up the set and took another hit from the fattest marijuana blunt I'd ever seen. Then he whistled at his gang underlings near the stage before flashing the set again. They responded by throwing that bleep back and then tossing a flurry of cash on stage until it was blurry. He slouched in his seat and watched the thuggery unfold like a proud dad. The arrogant thug couldn't help himself. He had to mumble the lyrics under his breath. He said a white beep couldn't make it. Now the street's hot, 'cause all I do is bake it. Ain't just getting even with it. Went and got sadistic with it. Wholesale dope flows, yeah. Fiends know I really get it, yeah. I bleep mad 'cause I don't really need her. Rap career just went solar. Don't pay her no mind, she bipolar. Sold hope to the kids and dope to the mamas. Went from slimming in the slums to pack shows and packing plenty sums. Took a heavy loss and turned my demon on. Burn the streets up and get right back on. If the pack's strong, you ain't doing it wrong. I'm hopping off the porch with this fan all day long. Bands, I make her dance, so I get plenty. Guns, I make him dance, so we pack many. I was dead and gone, Now I'm undead and standing all on my own. Tell them cowboys aim for the head if we foes, instead of doing it with their eyes closed like some street hoes. All these drugs get shipped in different zip codes. Rubber bands on rubber bands next to barcodes on barcodes. My angel said don't do it. My demon said you better prove it. Linked up with the Illuminati just to keep chugging. 10 years slanging and I'm still thugging. Oh yeah, that savage in me still showing. What happened to gangster rap? That bleep ain't growing. All these bleeps talk about is getting geeked up. Stay strapped up, ain't getting set up by no foes. Sonic rings keep me banked up on zeros. Stay trapped up, call me Scarface. Don't get poured up like syrup. Say goodnight to the bad guy. We ain't no role models or heroes. I might be a white boy, but I'm that bleep. Blood gang tell, I die, we get figures. Got my money the wrong way, so why do it the right way? Gang in my blood until I tilled over. Pour some dark out for my dead homies. Bleep it. Let that bleep spill over. Whole family died for this American dream. Things ain't exactly what they seem. Yeah, I'm serving whipped cream. Look at that flick of the wrist. Still serving them fiends. Chopped and screwed the white 3-6 mafia. Demon time when I'm flicking the dope. New drug same flick as whipping coke. This that real bleep for them real bleeps. This that jungle music for the silverback gorillas. This that murder music for my true killers. Ain't no foe of mine's walking me down. Ain't no chick of mine's taking me down. The beat transformed into something elegant and undead. When this odd transition transpired, the strip club exploded into a crescendo of undeserving cheers. And it was all too much for me. Quite an uncomfortable spectacle I had few words for. I was just happy that he finally stopped rapping to his own song, and at least let this new set of foul-mouthed lyrics speak for themselves. Even though I'm a vampire, got this new thirst. Yeah, the money forever and always come first. Yeah, if I die, bleep it, yeah. I lived a fast life and I loved it, yeah. Pour some white Henny out for my set. Yeah, we stay on that demonic bleep, hell yeah. Bleep with us and get your shit split. Oh yeah, I came from the gutter like no other. Yeah, beat hit like my switch kickback, yeah. Used to get my hands dirty, now I just kick back. I'm a boss, but I still got that 21 Savage. I'ma do this gang bleep until I die. If they saying I can't go get it, they lie. Always throw my setup when I ride. Illuminati on my mother bleep inside. Money ain't enough, I need that blood. All this drug money in the strip club. Throw this blood money in the feds' face. They ain't got no graves, they ain't got no case. Always look your enemy in the eye, 'cause if they flinch, you know they afraid to die. Always cut your dope with some cams. Always step on the pack and make M&Ms. Always keep a mother bleeping scrap on your side. Oh, I'm geeked up, yeah. I'm geeked up. Drugs got me high as a mug right now. White Henny in my cup got me geeked right now. She say her man at home. You know we ran game on her. Blood gang, chain gang. You know we ran a train on her. This ain't young Jeezy. It's that drug-dealing white boy who make it look easy. Oh, that Jones go hard, Tut remarked. Hell yeah, it do, Jake said before passing the blunt back to him. Damn, bro. Old girl got a wagon. Hell yeah, she do, Big Jake agreed. What's her name? Jake asked. Carnation, Big Girl said. Carnation? He asked again. Yes, sir, Big Deal replied. Hey, Liz, Jake said. Yes, I politely replied. Can we speed this nonsense up? I'm trying to get on with old girl with the wagon. Nonsense, I repeated. Yeah, been gave you all my word we good. Ain't with all this extra nonsense. Sure, 1 second. Stop acting petty, he told me, before having the nerve to offer me the joint. I was a bit dumbfounded and offended by the offer and let slip, Psst, as if. A big deal tapped his boss on the shoulder and told him, "Little bros want to be like the big bros. They're asking for some paper to throw at the strippers." The boss tapped the blunt a few times and chuckled under his breath before asking, "Oh yeah? Hell yeah. How much?" 10 racks. That's it? Yes, sir, 10. Give them fools 40. You sure about that? Them young bleeps? You know they ain't used to living like that. They gotta learn one day. Bet. I'll make the call. You know it's none of my business, but do you think it's a good idea to close this deal, in particular, while under the influence? I cautiously asked. When I looked down, I noticed my hand was gripping the edge of the table, as if I was afraid my inquiry would spike his ire. I see you're in your feelings. Well, I rolled my eyes and said, no. You ain't never met a real bleep, huh? Excuse me? I asked, a bit incredulous. Seriously, Aunt Devil. A lot of y'all ain't never been around no real bleep for real. I bet that bleep hit different, don't it? Go ahead. Say I'm lying. You're not a... never mind. Most people like you are locked up, you know. Or dead, he added. Yeah, that too, I agreed. Yeah, but I ain't. His gang partner Tut chimed in with, "You ain't just ain't. You took that bleep somewhere else. That's on the guys." He raised the pharaoh pendant to his gold chain and kissed it for good measure. Then he tapped the blunt one more time before passing it back. "The world is yours, boss. Put on for the dead homies." "Hell yeah," Jake replied. "How?" I asked. "How what?" he asked back. "How are you not dead?" "Strength," he stated. "Really? That's it?" "Yeah, it's the only thing that matters in this world. Without it, you got nothing." He paused and hit the blunt before throwing in, "You know how many times I almost died? I'm stronger for it, not weaker." "Oh, how many times have you?" "What, almost died?" he asked. "Yeah, how many?" I asked again. "Death is my best friend." I find that hard to believe. Me and that bleep go way back. Well, that's a very negative thing to say. You don't know bleep about the gutter. Taken aback, I politely told him, "Well, okay. Candor isn't exactly something you shy away from." He leaned forward and offered me the blunt yet again. I saw his face a little better in the light. Damn, was he easy on the eyes. A little too easy for someone who had such an ugly personality. His eyes were so blue and his skin soft as the clouds. The vampire blood that coursed through his veins had really done a number on him. Of course, I would never tell him that. He was already cocksure enough. Oh, and crude too. Speaking of which, his crudeness quickly reminded me why it was folly to think nice things about him. No matter how many pretty bones he had in his body, he was still an unpleasant ruffian without a polite bone. Stop playing, girl. The leaf ain't gonna smoke itself. And I already know how y'all rich vampires affiliated with the Illuminati get down. I gave in and told him, sure, why not? Just so I wouldn't come off as hostile or lame, as he liked to put it. I took one small drag and began to cough wildly. After I cleared my throat, I reminded him that we're not the Illuminati, and that he watched too many movies. Oh, what'd you call it then? What do you mean? I asked. A cabal of wicked-ass vampires with demons over everything, hell-bent on taking over the world. I ain't talking about no harebrained Pinky and the Brain scheme. Nah, you guys is standing on business. You're the one who watched too many movies if you think this ain't Illuminati. You're very well informed. I see you didn't deny it. I heard about what you did. What'd I do this time? You know, the fight. That's old news. Very cocky of you. We took down a fallen angel. Why wouldn't I be cocky after that? What's the fool's name? You know, the ashes me and your benefactor were smoking on. Lord Jerail, I answered. Yeah, that punk-ass bleep. When you see him, ask him how his vacay in hell was. No thanks. I value my life too much to do that. I don't know if you know this or not, but yeah, he was kind of messing around with you guys. It was a test, and apparently you passed. Congrats. He threw up a gang sign and said, yeah, well, tell him to get at me one-on-one next time. I was still fresh off the transformation when he tangled the first time. Tell all three of them bums to get me. William, aka your benefactor, and that sneaky-ass ninja vampire you always beefing with. Yeah, he can get it too. You have no shame. 0. Wow. I'm fresh out the mud. I put that on my bros. I put that on my dead brother. I am surprised my benefactor would associate himself with someone like you. Enough of that. Stop calling old dude your benefactor. We all know who you're talking about. You're talking about William's punk ass. I know, and I would, but... What's up? Cat got your tongue? It's not that. What is it? It's bad luck to say his name. Here we go with that devil speak. Well, that's true, you know. His father is... man. Gone somewhere with all that nonsense. You snappy vampires and your superstitions. I came from the fire. I know a demon when I see one. He might be the son of a bleep, but he ain't no son of a... He stopped mid-affront to swat a fly that had landed on his arm. When the same fly hovered over his head, he went off on the establishment. What kind of country-ass bull bleep? Flies flying around this dirty bleep. Hey, you guys smell that? I asked. Smell what? Tut asked. Almost smells carrion. Carrion? Onion? What'd that mean? Tut asked Big Deal. Big Deal smirked and responded with, sorry, ma'am, we're human. You and the boss man are the only ones here who got a supernatural sense of smell. Their boss chimed in with, I think you're right. Does smell like a dead body. I should know, I smelled plenty of them, damn it. Then he angrily cursed and swatted at another fly before he could finish his thoughts. Yeah, you good, boss? Tut asked. Go get the manager, homie. I'm on it, Big Deal said. Before he could take off and do his boss's bidding, a rush of panic hit the establishment. The ladies dressed in skimpy clothing screamed. The gangsters hollered at the thing that had shuffled through the front door. The night went from 0 to 100 just like that, as if God had snapped his ethereal fingers. Frightened pandemonium swept through the room like a contagion, and the odor, so horrible it made me sick to my stomach. Our table was positioned at the worst angle. It was hopeless. No matter how much I glanced around, I couldn't confirm my terrible suspicion. I flopped down in my chair and folded my arms in disgust. Great. As if this meeting could get any worse, I thought to myself. My sorrowful display was short-lived, though. I wish that wasn't the case. I wish I could have remained in the dark. Ignorance would have been a boon to my frayed nerves. King Tut jumped from his seat and placed his hand on his weapon. He hesitated when he realized it was one of their gang brothers. Not only was it one of the bros, but I could tell it was someone he was close to. His sudden expression of dismay made it clear that fate had stepped in and dealt him a cruel blow. Oh, the poor wretch defied the laws of nature and good taste as he shambled over towards us at a speed slightly quicker than death, while looking like he was at least already halfway there. There was no question he'd paid for his sins in spades. For he was caked in flies from head to toe, and the smell, oh my, was it as wretched and repulsive as the sight. It was a stench that made me afraid to gasp, So unbearable and pungent to the senses, it was offensive even to those not easily offended by such things as the sour smell of a cadaver. This rotting corpse of a once proud young man collapsed to his knees as soon as he reached our table. Then, as if that wasn't excruciating and exonerating enough of a fate, he just stared at their boss, but said nothing. I swear, the whole thing would have felt contrived if it wasn't so agonizing to watch. It was like his suffering was a macabre scene that had been cherry-picked right out of a horror movie by a cruel director. Jake's reaction was as unflinching and cold-hearted as it'll ever get. He placed his hand over Tut's arm and told him to chill, before he drew his weapon in a fit of rage. Then he stared grimly at their suffering gang brother and coldly asked, "What's up, little homie?" It was indescribable to see flies covering every inch of his body like that. It was impossible to tell if he was alive, dead, or somewhere in between. Either way, the one thing that was for sure was that he'd suffered. I could tell just by his deathly gaze. A cluster of flies crawled from his mouth. Every twitch of the cheek looked agonizing and disgusting beyond measure. His throat buckled to the will of the insects as if some unseen puppeteer manipulated his vocal cords like invisible strings. I prayed that he was indeed dead because, as convincing and reanimating of a performance as this was, it was still more distressing than fascinating. The worst part was the voice that escaped. It was this broken shrill of a thing filled with torment. Jake, come out and play. The moon does shine as bright as day. Leave your supper and leave your sleep behind. Come to me, your playfellow, into the streets. I'll wait for you on the other side. "Who the bleep are you?" Jake asked. "Are you afraid?" "You gotta be kidding me." "Will you come out and play? Or do I have to turn more of your friends into my playthings?" Jake ordered Big Deal and King Tut to keep everyone inside. He was about to tell me to do the same, but I quickly insisted on going with him. My benefactor would have killed me if I played it safe and reported back to him empty-handed. Okay, maybe kill is a bit extreme. He was polite and gentlemanly enough. Neither had he ever shown any outward signs of hostility towards me. But I wasn't about to give him any reason whatsoever to start. If I had any doubts on what to do, my choice was made crystal clear by one overarching thought. Even though I absolutely feared whatever fate awaited me outside, I feared the demonic wrath of my benefactor a whole lot more. Chapter 3. We rushed out the busted front door, made our way around the building and sprinted to the back of the parking lot. I stopped dead in my tracks when I saw him standing in front of the entrance to the alley. The whole thing was strange and surreal. He looked more like a silhouette than an actual person. Confusion preyed upon my subconscious mind. Rancor loomed in the air like a polluted cloud. I instinctively backed away from the threat and mentally prepared myself for the worst. He stood there with his back turned to us, not moving a muscle. Even the wind seemed to have little effect, as not one article of clothing was so much as shifting. Trying to put into words what I saw was like trying to climb a wall of insurmountable thoughts. A preposterous topic that would have made for an odd conversation piece amongst friends if I hadn't found myself standing there as an unwilling participant in this twisted theatre. A terrible feeling gnawed away at my psyche when I bravely strayed away from the shadows. I wanted to be closer to Jake, but once again my sixth sense kicked in and alarm bells started ringing in my head. I quickly realized how bad of an idea that was and looked for the nearest place to hide. I wasn't a fighter. Neither was I in some cheesy action flick where the bureaucrat suddenly gains the ability to fight. No, this was real life, and if I made the wrong move, I was a dead vampire. With that awful thought in mind, I quickly did an about-face and dashed behind the nearest vehicle. After sighing in a sad state of relief, I peeked over the hood of my not-so-clever hiding spot. And boy, was I relieved to see Jake standing his ground against that thing that was staring back at us like two rats caught in its iron cage. This is not good, I muttered to myself as a million ways to be eviscerated invaded my thoughts. Damn, even in what was arguably my greatest moment of uncertainty, I was curious to see if his fighting skills matched his bravado. Or indeed, if he was all bark and no bite, like I suspected. Oh boy, if he was, then we were in for one bumpy-ass ride, I thought to myself. The more I thought about it, the more I began to appreciate the absolute dreadfulness of it all. Jake bravely marched on until he was a stone's throw away from whomever this was. His voice was cool and easy, but I could sense the anger boiling just beneath the surface, waiting to explode. What's your name? Vektor. All right, V. Who sent you? Let's play a game. What kind of game? If you can figure out who sent me, I won't kill you slowly, he rasped sinisterly. His voice sounded strange and muffled through the ninja mask. I don't know. All I know is that I had to fight like mad to stop my mind from sinking deeper into that warm and fuzzy place called fear and panic. All I wanted to do right now was slink back home, sink into my snug beanbag chair and cuddle next to my cat, Beatty. I swear, some of the things I was forced to partake in as a vampire was sickening. Gross. The whole affair made me want to scream out, "Enough already!" But on the darker hand, I knew how significant of a situation this was. That I couldn't possibly be thinking about returning to my benefactor empty-handed. He might seem extremely reserved and polite, but come on, we all know who his father was. That's right, that same scornful, demonic blood coursed through his veins. Oh, the thought made my knees buckle and my stomach queasy. Jake looked over at me and frowned. I don't know if he did it out of genuine concern or annoyance at the fact that I was here. He didn't say anything, and I wasn't about to say anything. Instead, he turned his attention back to Vektor and said in a very matter-of-fact tone, "It's her sneaky-ass benefactor, ain't it? Strike one." Damn. I knew it was him. If it ain't him, who else it could be? Must be them weak-ass cash cowboys who hired you to do their dirty work. Strike two. Lirael, I hollered. Who? Jake asked. The devil. That's who sent you, isn't it? I asked him, fearing the answer. Last thing I needed was to be caught up in anything that involved the dragon. He was a monster who knew only one thing, and that one thing had twisted and tainted the world in red. Fire at the cost of redemption, sin at the cost of salvation. That's cheating, Vektor bellowed. Jake glowered at him and said, So what? He didn't say who had to answer. He just said it had to be correct. Next time, be more accurate, playboy. I'll show you why it's not a good idea to mock me. I'm going to teach you to never underestimate your foe. Especially one who has a trick up his sleeve. Eh? Is that right? He asked with a look of relish in his eyes at the thought of battle. I peeked over the car again just to make sure I was seeing this right. His look of confidence had turned into something difficult to explain. He was staring at me with an expression that screamed, "Whatever you do, do not look behind you." Well, I looked back, almost out of instinct, and saw what had him so startled. Oh God, it was him. The smell, it hit me as hard as the dreadful sight. And when I say him, what I really mean is that I was assailed by my assailant's clone or some other impossibility of sorts. I don't know. I didn't have time to think. I know it sounds silly, but I honestly don't know how else to describe what happened to me. He was standing in two places at once. The fear was paralyzing and electrifying in the most terrifying way describable. That I do know for sure. Another thing I know for sure is that when I tried to run, I couldn't. For some reason, my legs felt like they were chained down to the pavement. I just stood there petrified and gazing stupidly upon the thing that looked like it hated my existence. Vektor, or his shadow, or whatever this thing was, and it grabbed me by the neck and lifted me off my feet, choking the life out of me in the process. It turned its head a full 180 degrees and then asked Jake, "Would you trade your life for hers?" "Why would I do that?" he scoffed. "It's a test to prove your worth." Never did good on tests. "You feel powerless?" "Why'd you say that?" "I could snuff out her life, and there's nothing you can do about it. I'll let her live if you do the noble thing. If you give your life, I'll set her free. Oh, and you can trust me, I never ever break my promises." This ain't the movies, my guy. Chill with all the supervillain talk. It ain't cool. Defiance will get you nowhere. Just stop talking to me. What did you say? I said that bull don't work in the hood. Been there, done that, my guy. Gotta come way harder than that if you're trying to put the fear of God in me. Fine. Her life it is. The fitful anger in his voice matched the intensity of his squeeze. I could barely keep my eyes open. I could feel his nails digging into my throat. It was awful. It was inescapable. It was unbearable. I thrashed about, which did nothing but zap what little strength I had left. I couldn't fight it anymore. It was over. I closed my eyes and cursed Jake for selling me out. Just then I felt a slight and sudden shift in the wind. It was so subtle I almost missed it. What I saw out the corner of my eye brought instant relief to my battered senses. Jake had dashed next to Vektor, but instead of saving me like a gentleman, he of course had to make a vulgar, unflattering remark about strangulation. It should have been evident from my insufferable predicament that he was right and that he didn't need to go on about it like a bloke. Yes. It took a hell of a lot of effort and struggle to strangle the life out of someone, especially another vampire. Yes. It might be super painful for the victim and ultra-fulfilling for the assassin, but it was also excruciatingly slow and so counterintuitive of a kill method it was reserved for lunatics and barbarians. These were all true statements made by my supposed savior. And that was my assailant's mistake, summoned up so eloquently by Jake. He'd given him too much time to counter his assault by deciding upon strangulation as my method of execution. Jake cocked his arm back and smote him in the ribcage. The blow scattered the duplicate that had a death grip on my neck into a thick swarm of flies. There were so many of them they blotted out the sun. I fell to my knees and began to gasp. He was right. It might take longer than the movies let on, but damn did almost being strangled to death hurt like hell. My neck was on fire. My arms wouldn't stop shaking out of a combination of pain and panic. I had to stop myself from falling on my face several times. Jake was about to ask me if I was okay, but before he could, he backed away and shouted, "Oh, bleep," when the blinding swarm of flies wheeled around and encircled me. I couldn't move. I could barely breathe. It felt like I'd been encased in cement. Every second I spent in that prison was damnation. I started to go mad. And the smell was unlike anything. God, curse the sensation of a million flies buzzing, prodding, picking, crawling all over me. My worst nightmare had come true. I tried to reach my arms out to Jake. I tried like mad to bring about my salvation, but I couldn't. I just couldn't squeeze the words out. I'm sure the frightful flash in my eyes gave away what agony refused to convey. He saw my pain and was about to reach out to me, but then Vektor spoke once more. His words even more chilling and soul-crushing than before. "Now, Mr. Superhero, I'm going to ask you one more time to choose." Jake looked at his fist and then over at Vektor, who was still standing there in the same spot, with his back turned to us. He was practically taunting us at this point with his frightening ability. I'll never understand how he managed to usher so much grief and havoc into my world without so much as moving an inch. I thought about my life, about how I never wanted any of this. What could I have done differently? I was born a vampire. I was born into this twisted cycle of sadness and madness. No, I had to pull myself out of this sinking feeling. I had to remain strong and put my faith in Jake. He might be a lot of things, but if my benefactor trusted him, then I trusted him. My benefactor was way too strong of a vampire lord to keep the company of fools. Jake left me there. The look in his eyes told me that he hadn't given up on me. He marched over to the maniac, cracked his knuckles, and inquired upon an alternative. What if I choose a third option? Oh, yeah? Yeah. There is no... He smashed him in the back with a brutal punch. The noise his fist made as it connected sounded like a wrecking ball colliding into the side of a large building. The flies shielding Vektor scattered, revealing that he'd been facing us this entire time. Vektor gripped his stomach and fell to a knee. His eyes bulged as shock overtook his senses. He tried to speak, but the pain wouldn't allow him. Jake stared at his smoldering fist. He was surprised at how crunchy and heavy the impact was. His suspicion had been confirmed. The flies that covered him were somehow stronger than normal. Not only that, but they acted as some kind of living armor. A shell that would have been impossible for the average vampire to crack. Jake staggered back and watched in horror as the flies that covered Vektor's face scattered. And what was left was a raw, gnarled, gaunt deformity. He removed his ninja mask and retched a thick, sludge-like expectoration from his distended mouth. The toxic, bloody, jelly-like substance congealed into an endless swarm of flies after splashing onto the ground in front of him. The flies then took to the sky and formed into this giant heaping mass of destruction. They quickly encircled their victim as if they were performing a delicate dance of blades. The black mist ensnared him like a deadly storm. And it all happened before he could react. The horde forced him down to a knee with a wind velocity similar to a moderate tornado. All he could do was shield his face with his arms and do his best to remain strong in the face of pestilence. Flies clumped to his arms like 1,000 tiny scabs. He tried to stand, but the confusion was too much to overcome. For a moment there, I thought he was going to scream in horror. He'd been overwhelmed, but instead of allowing defeat to settle in, he steadied his mind. And like something straight out of a movie, he staggered to his feet, despite everything that stood against him. Vektor dashed towards the beleaguered champion and drop-kicked him. Jake absorbed most of the damage with his arms. The force was tremendous and nearly knocked him off his feet. Jake's strength was jaw-dropping, though. He refused to bend or break from a strike so violent and perfectly placed it would have crushed anyone else. The inertia caused him to slide back, leaving drag marks in the concrete as his feet gave ground. Vektor shrieked in a toxic fit of bleak anger. He scowled and howled wildly while gripping his arm in pain. I couldn't freaking believe what I was seeing. The lower half of his arm twisted and contorted. He cried out in misery as his mutilated arm mutated into a malodorous blade of malady. Flies dripped from the putrid coagulation like purge fluid leaking from a gassy, greasy, bacteria-infected corpse. His blade of living flies feasted on necrotized flesh all the way up to his elbow, and the quivering hand and forearm were like fetid, flesh-eating fasciitis, fueled by necrotic despair and parasitic hunger. Jake was still recovering from the last assault when he struck again. He thrust his bile blade into his chest, and 1,000 hardened flies crashed into what sounded like plate armor. The unexpected impact caused Vektor to stumble back. He gawked at his bleak blade in confusion, surprised to see that it had broken in half. Jake looked down at his chest, counted his blessings, and then smirked. He tore his shirt off and revealed what looked like ancient armor. He tapped the spot where Vektor had struck and bragged about how he's been wearing his trusty weighted vest for years. Vektor was incensed. Hatred oozed from his mouth when he screamed, "How did you get that? That isn't a weighted vest, you maggot. It's a harness of sin." Oh, funny you say that. That's the same thing that one fallen angel said. What's his name? Oh yeah, Jurael. What a freak. He even had that same dumbass look on his face right before we poured him out. "Who gave that to you?" "My guardian angel," he joked. "If you're that strong with it, then..." Oh. Jake's smile altered into a wolfish sneer. He nodded along and said, "You're starting to get the picture. I can take it off if you want. Give you a demonstration?" No, stop." "Fair enough. You still haven't won. Look, homie, I'm gonna ask you one last time to let her go. I'm not in the mood for games. I was having a good time with the bros before you came along and ruined it. I'd hate to have to take my anger out on you." "Never. I'll kill her." "Your funeral, pal. You may be stronger than I thought, but I still have the upper hand. Take one more step, and I'll have my little minions break every bone in her body." "Yeah? You'd do that?" "Try me, you arrogant fool." "I got another secret." "You're stalling." I'm serious." "What's your secret?" "I ain't even turned yet." "Impossible. You're bluffing." "See, my fangs are still retracted." Chapter 4. Jake raised his hand and glared into the eyes of his rattled foe. His knuckles cracked loudly when he tightened his hand into a fist. The varicose veins in his arms looked like rivets that had been hammered into steel. The ground around him shifted ever so slightly. His power was undeniable. Muscles twitched and tightened into the same impenetrable stone walls that had protected Constantinople from the Turks. His strength was a testament to barbarity and torturous training. He stood before his foe like the thunder god Zeus, slayer of titans. I started to panic and thrash about. Flies crawled into my ears, irritated the inside of my nose, and made me feel completely uncomfortable in my own skin. The most terrifying part about the whole ordeal was feeling them worm their way into my mouth. The sensation of soggy, retching, disease-ridden foreign bodies squirming and wiggling their way down my throat, with the sluggishness and consistency of slime, still gives me the chills. I cried, choked, and gagged, only to repeat the cruel process again and again until my spirit had nearly been broken. I tried to scream, but instead I violently vomited up a thick glob of slob mixed with blood and insect parts. It was a humiliating nightmare, made even worse by the fact that Jake was my only hope. He had to do something to make it stop. He simply had to, because if this torture went on any longer, I was a goner for sure. Jake channeled his power and allowed the vampire's side to fully take over. His transformation was unlike anything I'd ever witnessed. I could feel the sudden surge in strength. God, it shook the cars and made the ground tremble under me. He was shredded to the bone, possessed monstrous muscle maturity and eye-popping vascularity. He dashed in front of Vektor before he could react and landed a bone-crushing uppercut that sent him flying. He bounced off the side of the second-story building right next to the strip club and came crashing down like a boulder. Dust and debris flew everywhere. Well, the sight was chilling and absolutely awe-inspiring. Instead of following up his assault with a victorious smite, he just stood there, stretching his neck muscles while admiring the devastation he'd wrought upon the battlefield. He flexed his bicep muscle, showing off the ripped arm he'd used to rain down justice. He snarled and snorted like a grizzly on the prowl. There was nothing his opponent could do but pray that he didn't become his next meal. "I heard about that little black church you come from, about how terrible and unforgiving your training is. You think you know what it's like to train under brutal conditions, huh? This harness of sin was worn by the devil himself after his defeat, am I right? All of them, the fallen angels, had to wear one. This harness is so heavy it weighed them down to the point where they couldn't cause any more mischief. Prevented them from flying, which is the worst thing you can do to a group of proud angels. They remained like that for God knows how long, imprisoned, marred, shamefully defeated, until finally they were thrown out of one misery and into another one. L'Oreal and all the angels he had led astray were tossed from the very same heavens they'd fought so hard to conquer. Yeah, that's right. You think you know pain, but you don't. All you know is the dark side of agony. A broken lackey like you doesn't stand a chance against me. I'll limp back to your stupid little torture chamber church. When you get there, tell Lucy to send somebody worth their salt the next time he wants to test my strength. And maybe, just maybe, I'll break a bleeping sweat. The flies loosened their hold upon me the very moment the blow was inflicted upon their master. It's like they knew something was amiss. They untwisted and uncoiled from around my body without a moment to spare. I would have died if my misery would have lasted any longer, and because of that I thanked the blood goddess for saving my life. It's the only thing I could think to do to stop myself from having a panic attack. My eyes swelled with anger. It felt like I'd survived hell. Having what seemed like an endless tide of insects crawling all over every inch of my body like that. Oh, most violating experience ever. He sent out a distress call to his precious pestilence. They listened to the eerie screech and made their way back home. The insects encased him almost like they had me, but instead of torment, they provided him with protection. They encased every inch of his body in some form of symbiotic armor. It was disgusting in every way imaginable. The encrusted, corroded cuticle mutilated and molted his sickly skin. Every quiver and thrust were followed by some hollow screams and shattered bones. The flies had mutated his body into a giant human-like insectoid that was at least several feet tall. His living, breathing armor was a metallic black color that gleamed with the same fiery intensity as sapphire. It was as viscous as a substance that one would expect to stink and fuse with flesh and organs so firmly. Somehow, through millions of years of evolution, the exoskeleton enhanced his mobility and fluidity while covering him in a dense, textural armor similar to chitin. He spread his ironclad insect wings that were on his jagged thorax. They snipped and zipped through the wind like two giant steampunk propellers. His compound eyes were large and oval. The exoskeleton mimicked the black, hardened pleats and hairy braided creases that safeguarded a fly under near-perfect protection. Worse yet were the haunting echoes, grinding and oozing noises that escaped from its dripping mouthparts with each coagulated regurgitation upon its fuzzy antennae. The sight was as ungodly an image that comes to mind when thinking of ungodly things. He was wretched, wicked and low, a vampire who masked himself in depravity. I nearly vomited all over my blouse when he vomited this syrupy, saliva-like concoction all over his forelegs. The soupy, sticky goop congealed like marmalade. He took this secretion and rubbed it over his eyes. The sight was disgusting and left me hating him even more. He smirked and snickered like a maniac. Then he took flight and taunted Jake with his blistering speed. He was fast, way faster than before. He buzzed around Jake's head several times until he found the perfect moment to strike. His attack caught Jake completely off guard. It was such a perfectly timed strike I couldn't help but wince. The thought of running away crossed my mind, but I knew in my heart that if he died, if Vektor was able to take down this giant slayer of a vampire, he was going to come after me next, and I was dead. I took a breath and steadied my nerves. I had to be ready for the unthinkable, for that nightmare scenario fueled by fear. Each blow was crushing and pushed him back several inches. He had his arms crossed and defended himself admirably, but at this rate it was only a matter of time before he lowered his guard, and that was what this vile foe was waiting for. He wanted to break his spirit so he could finish him off with a death strike. Vektor landed a few feet away from me. I was too petrified to even shiver. The smell of rotten death hung in the sky. It was sickening to the stomach to even be around someone so foul and freakish. Thankfully, he didn't even look my way. No, he was focused solely on his target. So much so, he hunched over on all 6 legs and cackled in as unnatural a manner as inconceivable. He had Jake right where he wanted him. He warned him that this was it, that this final strike would destroy him. When he saw Jake brace himself for the inevitable, he cackled even louder and announced it was no use. He told him that You might be strong, but strength isn't the only thing. You should have listened to me when I told you you were going to die, you arrogant cretin. Well, I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. I had to know how it would end, even at the cost of my own life. So I watched on in horror as the smell of sewage writhed its way through my nostrils. He expectorated a gelatinous, slimy, milky film of sticky saliva, along with other slushy, repugnant regurgitations from his spongy, hairy proboscis. He used the filmy, fuming waste to fuse his forelegs into an odious, fetid blade of pestilence and odium. His insectoid wings buzzed, and his halters oscillated rapidly, which allowed him greater balance, sensory and range of motion while hovering in the air at such breakneck speeds. He mustered what must have been all his strength and flew towards Jake. The viciousness and velocity knocked me back, causing my back to slam into the vehicle behind me. The car alarm blasted into my ears, causing me a brief bit of disorientation. My vision slowly returned to me after becoming blurry as my brain rattled around in my skull. I quickly looked over in the direction I last saw them and couldn't believe my eyes. What was I witnessing? No, there was no freaking way. In the short amount of time it had taken me to regain my bearings, the tides of battle had shifted. I covered my ears as a noise that was as mythic and terrific as thunder rang down from the heavens. The smite shook the ground like a celestial warhammer wielded by a holy paladin guardian angel commander. Jake had all but conquered his foe with a devastating smote that sang the cries of the fallen into the hall of heroes. Using only brute force, he had smashed his way to victory against all odds and reason. Damn, I guess he was right. Power in the form of strength would forever reign supreme. He had Vektor firmly gripped by the throat. The veins and muscles in his arms popped and pulsated with wild energy. I could hear him crushing his foe's neck as his grip tightened. He held on to his victim until he lowered his wings and the will to fight had completely fled his spirit. Only then, when he saw that sweet look of defeat in his opponent's eyes, did he look back. Oh, no way this is happening, my mind kept repeating as I witnessed what had to be a fever dream. Somehow he had stopped Vektor's final attack without breaking a sweat. Well, it was quite a sight to behold. His savage nature, I'd only ever seen it in our fallen masters. It was an untamed power filled with rage and ruin. His flowing blonde hair fluttered in the wind. His shredded physique was that of a Greek demigod. He stood there like a demon who could only be brought down by an archangel. His blue eyes glowed with the heat of bloodshed and battle. A wild, Grendel-like grin took hold of his expression. He raised his conquered foe even higher, as if he was Hercules standing atop Mount Olympus, lifting a meager offering before Jupiter for immolation. You evil vampires and your stupid tricks, huh? I told you, strength is the only thing that matters. Tricks are for kids and punks like you. Jake let go then, took a step back and watched scornfully as his foe collapsed to his knees. He raised his arm above him and tightened his hand into a fist. He was in insane condition. He had muscles on top of muscles. In that moment, he was a rippled, veiny masterpiece of iron and stone, who had been forged by the furnace of fate into the image of Thunor. He raised his mythical warhammer towards Valhalla, and gave his vanquished foe a moment to gather up what last few words he might have had, before he was to be sundered by a thunderstrike in the name of Odin. The pain. What about it? Jake snarled. It's unimaginable. Why is that? The flies. Damn it. Makes sense now, Jake muttered while lowering his arm, unstiffening his muscles and allowing his dense mind to stumble upon an epiphany he should have already known. Wait, that's why the flies are so strong. You let them feed on your vampire blood. You just figured that out? Bleep. I can only imagine being harvested on day in and day out with no end in sight. I can't sleep, I can't think. Every waking moment is consumed by pain. I was born into the Black Church, and now I will die never knowing a moment of relief from this all-consuming agony. Dude, stick to the script. I don't understand. Can't kill you if I feel sorry for you. No, you must. I can't go back. The dragon, Lord Daystar, he would not be pleased to hear that I have failed. Please, end my suffering. I beg you. I can't go back. Send me to hell now. Jake shook his head and said, ain't gonna happen. You're on your own with that one. Vektor shrieked in a fit of terrible malice and distress like a foul creature drowning in its own blood. A life of torment and miserable, unyielding agony had finally come to an end. Even if he was to be forgiven for his defeat, he could not return to the Black Church, not after seeing that his existence was a cruel curse. Sympathy shot through my heart like an arrow when I saw him lower his head in acquiescence. It was awful. I couldn't even begin to imagine how much he suffered. And for what? Because it was seen as some kind of twisted honor to be handpicked by the Black Church? Well, the selection process was as esoteric as it gets, and I won't even pretend to know what goes into all of it. All I know for sure is that certain vampires, like Vektor, are chosen at birth for training as saplings in an even more secretive and sacred sect of the Black Church. These chosen few are called servants of the fallen. Even if his training was a success, for reasons known only to the Church, the odds of him becoming a replacement member of the Tormented were slim to none. What made the Tormented utterly terrifying, well, besides their freakish powers, was the fact that they didn't speak and wore iron masks. There's no reasoning with these silent monsters. Say or do the wrong thing in their presence, and they wouldn't hesitate to kill you. Our laws don't protect us from them either. They obey only our fallen masters, and no one in their right mind would speak against them. Even with all that being said, I don't know. I guess something inside me mourned his demise. It's true, he was a murderous monster who probably didn't deserve an ounce of sympathy. But when I gazed into his eyes, I didn't see a killer. Damn, he wasn't even bedeviled yet. All he was a sad sapling whose mind and body had been beaten and broken in the pursuit of bedevilment. When the end came, his face contorted from the pain of larvae feeding on his body in a mindless, endless feast that had continued without interruption until now. All the tissue had been eaten from his cheeks until there was nothing left but blackened bones. His sunken eyes were as hollow and downcast as his damaged soul. All the flies that encased his body in dreadful power now began to devour his flesh in one final feeding frenzy. It was a slow, agonizing death upon which he had much time to reflect upon his sins. Bit by bit, inch by inch, his flesh was liquefied by the acrid, acrylic, acid-like substance until there was nothing left but dust and bones. The flies then took to the sky and dispersed after parting ways with their master's sad husk. A tear slipped from my eye once it was over. Those bastards. We served such cruel masters. If it weren't for the people I loved, I would have had nothing to do with this. Now, as morbid as it might sound, it's safe to say I was happy for Vektor. At least he was free. Free from a life of darkness and pain. Free from a world in which vampires were terrorized by fallen angels. I thanked Jake for helping me to find my feet, only to roll my eyes as he began boasting about how strong he was. He even worked up the nerve to ask me to give Lord Jurael a message. He practically begged me to tell him how bad he wanted a rematch. I told him he was crazy for thinking I knew any of our demonic overlords. He would have to find someone who was crazy enough to contact him on his behalf, because there's no way in hell I would even so much as inquire about it, especially not to any of my aristocratic associates. To think, last thing I needed was to be judged by my already super judgy social circle. So as I said in the beginning, there's been a lot of clamour for a vampire story of a certain length. Well, I can't just summon up one that's about 8, 9, 10 hours long just like that. So I hope that will assuage your hunger for a little bit anyway. That was weird, wild, and the kind of vampire story I've been looking for quite a while. That one's been sitting on my desktop in a Word document for way too long. So I'm glad I finally got around to doing that one. Weird, wild, strange, bizarre, and I enjoyed it, so I hope you did too. Anyway, my dear friends, that is enough for this evening. I'll be back again very soon. Podcast tomorrow night, and back here with something long and exciting on Friday evening, so I hope you're going to join me again. Until then, you'll sleep well. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story today. It really means a lot to me and to the author of the story, of course. Well, if you want to know more about me, I'm pretty much everywhere on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can download my music on SoundCloud. I've got a Patreon if you feel like. Throw me $1 or $2. Very much appreciated. And of course, on Reddit, I have a place where you can leave stories if you want me to read one that you've written. Well, hoping to see you all again very soon. Till then, sweet dreams. Bye-bye.